Director of ISGAP, and I'm speaking to you from Oxford. And I'd like to welcome everybody from around the world, from North America, Europe, and Israel. And today we have an important seminar with some amazing experts that we're very fortunate to be able to have them join us. So today we're speaking about pandemics, conspiracy theories, and anti-Semitism. And we have three wonderful experts on various aspects of this complex and important issue. We have Joel Kotek, Sima Vaknin-Gil, and Rudy Reichstadt. And I'm going to introduce everybody in a moment, but I just want to set the context. And I think basically, before the pandemic, many of us who were studying anti-Semitism were very concerned about the emergence of extremism, of radical Islam, the extreme left, and sort of the Red-Green Alliance, and also now the reemergence of white nationalism and xenophobia, kind of right-wing anti-Semitism and sort of neo-fascism and nationalism that's emerging or re-emerging in Europe and even in the Americas, in the United States. And that was sort of the focus. And some of us were looking at globalization and marginalization and why these three social movements were sort of attacking the center. And now in the age of the pandemic, perhaps these contradictions or cleavages or social movements will gain more strength, perhaps. And the three experts who are joining us will be examining the issue of pandemics and conspiracy theories and anti-Semitism. And in a sense, what we're trying to do is start a conversation on how, as a community, as a Jewish community in the diaspora, Israel, and also people concerned about human rights, how are we going to deal with this potential deep exacerbation of marginalization and fear and despair? And we know historically that when there's issues of pandemics and crises, that anti-Semitism has historically increased and increased dramatically. And Joel Kotek will be addressing the history of pandemics. And we know that on issues of online anti-Semitism and conspiracy theories in the age of pandemics, that conspiracy theories and anti-Semitic tropes are very important. And Rudy Reichstadt will be introducing issues of conspiracy theories that are going online and the exacerbation of anti-Semitism. And Sima Vaknin-Gil, who will speak more on a strategy. How can Israel and communities in the diaspora begin to address this from a strategic perspective? And she's an expert on strategic issues. So I'll just briefly introduce you to Joel Kotek. He'll be the first speaker. Joel is a professor at the Free Universities in Brussels, and he's also at the Institut d'études politiques de Paris. It's an important university in Paris. Joel Kotek is a member of several scientific committees, including the Revue d'Histoire de Shoah de Paris, the sort of the historical review of the Holocaust based in Paris. It's he's also on the board of the Jewish Museum of Warsaw. He participates in the Fondation Adeline, the Adeline Foundation. They do work on the Holocaust and reaching out to the Islamic world. And he works with other organizations in France on similar issues. He's also, he works at the Center of Documentation for Contemporary Jewry in Paris. And he's also a correspondent for the Moshe Kantor Center on Anti-Semitism and Racism, which is based at Tel Aviv University. And he's been an ISGAP research fellow with us for several years, and he's a professor on our summer programs at Oxford University. So he'll be the first speaker. I'm also pleased to introduce you to Rudy Reichstadt. He'll be the second speaker. He'll be speaking on conspiracy theories online. He has a degree from the Institut d'études politiques de Provence in France in political science. And he's the founder and administrator of Conspiracy Watch, which is a very important website. If you Google conspiracywatch.org, you'll see
.info.
Pardon?
.info. Conspiracywatch.info.
Conspiracywatch.info, excuse me. It's a French website, but very highly professionally done, looking at issues of conspiracy theories with a focus on anti-Semitism. And he's also a member of the Observatoire Radical Politique in France and the Fondation de Jean Jaurès. And he's focused on issues of anti-Semitism in France, and he's published widely. And we also have, as the third speaker, looking at the strategic response to these very important issues, we have Sima Vaknin-Gil. Sima is a former intelligence officer in the Israeli Air Force, and she's also the former chief of the censor of the State of Israel, and she is the former Director-General of the Ministry of Strategic Affairs and Public Diplomacy. And Sima played a key strategic role in trying to sort of roll out an Israeli and diaspora response to the reemergence of anti-Semitism. So she really has her finger on the pulse of how we're responding to increased anti-Semitism globally. Sima is an expert on intelligence work and data research-based action campaigns and the delegitimization of Israel, as well as the BDS movement. And she holds a Middle East Studies and International Relations degree in National Security Studies from the National Defense College. And now she's currently involved in several initiatives combating anti-Semitism around the world. So it's really a pleasure to have the three of you with us as expert panelists. And Joel, I'll move it on to you to look at the history of anti-Semitism and pandemics.
Okay, thank you, Charles. And thank you, Ira, to have organized this meeting. As you know, my English is not the best one. And as long as we don't have a lot of time, so I've prepared more or less a text with slides, as usually I do with my students at university. And I'm trying to see if it's going to work, but it seems to be all right. So do you see it?
Yes.
Okay. So let's start. And what my topic will be to try to explain the politically and the historical explanation of the emergence of those theory of against the Jews. So once again, irrational obsession with Jews demonstrate that anti-Semitism is not a marginal problem, but old mainstream. As the coronavirus pandemic continues globally, so too has anti-Semitism. Social media have exploded with anti-Semitic comments or cartoons. Why? Because this accusation is first the resurgence of an archaic mentality, and secondly, an habitus that since the Middle Age has held the Jews responsible for the misfortune of the world, and third, supposedly connected with the devil. Let me see. The concept of diabolical causality, a model developed by the French historian Léon Poliakov, is very enlightening to understand the current phenomenon. It allows us to understand why conspirators exclude both chance and natural causes from their explanations when a disturbing or worrying phenomenon appears suddenly. Conspiracy theories are an inescapable glue. They provide an explanatory system by substituting a simplistic version of the world for its complex reality. And in these pseudo-explanatory and accusatory narratives, Jews or Zionists are more than often play a major role. The coronavirus crisis confirmed the hypothesis that in a situation of uncertainty and distress, Jews are accused of being linked in one way or another to the phenomenon that caused fear, I would say even panic. Thus in France, in this context, the context of diabolical causality, Jews found themselves accused of being responsible, if not for the disease itself, at least for the failure of the health crisis, and obviously for financial reason. The pseudo-comedian but real antisemite Dieudonné directly accused the Rothschild of wanting to speculate on the disease on the back of the French people with the help of the former health minister Agnès Buzyn, her husband Yves Lévy, and the head of the health service, Jérôme Salomon, obviously all three being Jewish. Dieudonné, and with many other people, have thus denounced a conspiracy set up by a criminal organization, obviously dominated by Jews. And you can see here the former Minister of Health, Agnès Buzyn, and you can see that she's directly poisoning, French people. And as an historian, I would say that this is not a real surprise, because this reflex of accusing the Jews is ancient. It dates back to the victory of Christianity over Judaism, from the time when the Jews were wrongly accused of conspiring to murder Jesus with the help of Judah. And you know, Judah is supposed to be the Jew by excellence. As we know, the Sanhedrin is very early and wrongly accused of being responsible for the death of Christ, and Judah, the Jew, of having denounced him for money. An absurd accusation, because we all know that Jesus was Jewish, as all his followers. This is, this myth, of course, absolves the real culprits, the Romans, who were destined to become Christian. Yet, so just you couldn't blame the Romans. This is why Ponce Pilate is presented here as a Jew. You can see that Ponce Pilate has a Jewish head. From that moment on, the Jews will be logically designated as the usual suspect, the responsible of world misfortune. The myth of Judah is essential to understand why the Jews has been hated all over Christianity, designated as the evil agent on earth, and then blamed for all manners of ills, social and biological. And this is a representation of Jesus, Then you can see on the first figures is supposed to be Judah, and you can see that here Ponce Pilate has the Jewish head. So Ponce Pilate is no more a Roman, he is a Jew. Through the figures of Judah, of course, it is the evil Jew who are designated for popular vindictiveness. Everything else is only commentary. So when the Black Death broke out on the steppe of Asia in 1346, the Jews almost naturally found themselves accused of being responsible for it. In their distress, emotionally distraught Europeans searched desperately for an explanation. Why not the Jews? Indeed, the Jews were in fact anthropologically, culturally the designated suspect. Had they not murdered Christ, and were they not accustomed to horrible practice and crimes, from the murder of Christian children to the desecration of the Holy Host? We know the consequence. Hundreds of Jewish communities were destroyed. In Basel, for instance, more than 1,000 Jews were killed on the night of the Valentine days. A mass suicide of Jews took place in Frankfurt, and the Jewish community of Erfurt was completely wiped out. Well poisoning will become one of the three gravest charges against the Jews during the Middle Age. And this is a representation of Jews burned in Tournai. This is a city in Belgium. Since the Black Death, the Jews will be coined, identified with poisoners, vector of disease, or even more with the disease itself, in the form of microbes, bacilli, and other bacteria, always in a context of conspiracy theory. In the 19th century, the anti-Semitic notion emerged that Jews were plotting to establish control over the world. One of the best examples of this type of discourse is the protocol, of course, of the Elders of Zion, a false anti-Semitic document. In the 20th century, anti-Semitic canard have been added the Jews were also responsible for the propagation of communism and would try to dominate the mass media industry. Those anti-Semitic canals with political and economical context became political myth, not only in Germany, but also in France. The French anti-Jewish literature in the 30s did not fail to draw on this source of inspiration. With the development of science, the Jews were no longer accused of poisoning the wealth, but as being infection agents themselves, microbes to be eliminated. This was one of the reasons why the Nazis decided on the final solution. The Jews, as you can see, der Jude als Weltparasit. If the Slav were still men, albeit of an inferior race, the Jews were bacilli, bacteria, that have to be eliminated at all cost. Let us remember that the Jewish poisoner myth appeared again in early 1953 in the form of the doctor plot in Stalin's last day. It means in Soviet Union. Similar charges were made in the 80s and the 90s in radical Islam, nationalist and Muslim fundamentalist propaganda that accused the Jews of spreading AIDS and other infectious disease. Let us remember too, in his address to the European Parliament on 23 June 2016 in Brussels, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas made an unsubstantiated allegation accusing rabbis of poisoning Palestinian wells. Of course, this speech received a standing ovation in Brussels. A day later, Abbas admitted his claim at the EU were baseless. In Arab Muslim culture, the myth of the poisonous Jew is very present. Some hadiths accuse the last wife, who was a Jewish victim of the Prophet Muhammad, of having poisoning him. This myth was largely updated with the death of Yasser Arafat, allegedly poisoned by the Mossad. It is clear that anti-Semitism is the oldest expression of conspiracy as a cosmogony. This global pandemic has shown in just a matter of days that anti-Semitism is more than ever global. The Jews still remain the scapegoat by excellence. And I will show you the last picture, which has been made just before the First World War by a Jewish artist, Abel Pan. And it's wonderful to understand why anti-Semitism is essential, for people to explain the misfortune and the chaos that we live in. And you can see that everyone is blaming the Jews, or of course is responsible of nothing. So thank you very much, and sorry for my terrible accent.
It was a wonderful presentation, Joel. Thank you very much. And we'll come back to you during the Q&A, so thank you. The next speaker is Rudy Reichstadt, who's the founder of Conspiracy Watch, a very important website and research looking at conspiracy theories in contemporary society. So Rudy, please proceed.
Thank you, Charles, and good morning, everyone. And thank you for inviting me to this webinar. Just like Joel, I prepared a little paper for this meeting in order to be most effective as possible. So for over 10 years now, I've been running a website, you told it, conspiracywatch.info, which critically analyzes conspiracy theories and which tries to debunk these theories. Joel made brilliantly the history of the anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. So I will focus on the emergence of conspiracy theory on COVID-19. So what can we say about it? First, it was foreseeable that the appearance of a new epidemic would generate an outbreak of conspiracy theories. Without even going back to the Black Death, to the plague, accusations of conspiracy emerged during the cholera epidemics of the 19th century, as well as during the outbreaks of AIDS, the outbreaks of the influenza A H1N1 virus, and for the Zika virus as well. So the first conspiracist commentaries in the French public space around the new coronavirus emerged on Monday, the 20 January 2020. It was on this day that the media reported that an expert from the Chinese government had declared that the virus could be transmitted between humans. Taking the opposite views to what the Chinese authorities had announced 11 days earlier. On the social medias, then began to circulate what I propose to call a low intensity conspiracism, flowing into pre-existing older conspiracy myth. We had the thesis that this new disease had been invented by pharmaceutical companies to increase their profits. The thesis that it was part of a CIA destabilization plan to trouble the Chinese regime. And last but not least, the thesis that it was a means for the Beijing government to regulate its own surplus population. All these things on the first day, please notice it. On the first day. The very next day, on Twitter, a conspiracy theory said that documents can prove that the coronavirus had been manufactured in a laboratory and that the current epidemic was being used to enrich the pharmaceutical industry, you know, big pharma. Although the experts have rejected since January the idea that the new coronavirus could have been created by man, conspiracy, commentary, speculations presenting the virus as a biological weapon have propagated, incriminating the United States, as well as Bill Gates, George Soros, the State of Israel, and in France, the Pasteur Institute, and even the French government. On March 17th, 2020, shortly after the official entry into the containment, the population containment measures in France, an internet user nicknamed Cat Antonio, who in fact is a yellow vest linked to the French anti-Semitic polemicist Dieudonné Mbala, he posted a video on his Facebook account that was exceptionally viral. In the 20 hours following its publication, the post had been shared almost 100,000 times, and before it was taken offline, it had been seen more than 3 million times in one day. The man accused the Pasteur Institute and former Health Minister Agnès Buzyn of being involved in a conspiracy against public health and against the French people. Other conspiracy-related, highly viral contents have also appeared since then, crystallizing notably around the use of hydroxychloroquine to treat patients infected with COVID-19. You probably know that this molecule is promoted by Professor Didier Raoult and would represent an effective and above all a cheap treatment that big pharma and their puppets, the government, would reject according to the conspiracy's doxa. On March 24, far-right member of the European Parliament, Gilbert Collard, published on his YouTube channel a video suggesting that Agnès Buzyn and her husband, Yves Lévy, were the instigators of a real conspiracy against public health. with more than 400,000 views in 2 days only. This is the most viewed video. Excuse me, I have a retour. Okay, it's okay. So I said that this is the most viewed video on Gilbert Collard's YouTube account since its creation in 2012, 8 years ago. 3 weeks ago, our organization, Conspiracy Watch, and the Jean Jaurès Foundation published a survey which shows that 26% of French people believes that COVID-19 is caused by a virus manufactured in a laboratory, either intentionally, for 17%, or accidentally, for 9%. Extreme right-wing supporters are by far the most permeable to this conspiracy theory. For example, while only 2% of supporters of the presidential majority, supporters of Emmanuel Macron, considers that the new coronavirus was intentionally manufactured in a laboratory. 40% of the supporters of the Rassemblement National, the new name of the National Front, Front National, subscribe to this thesis. 23 points above the average. In total, if we add to this 40% the 15% of the RN sympathizers who consider that the coronavirus was accidentally manufactured in a laboratory, a majority, 55% of the RN sympathizers therefore considers that the coronavirus was manufactured by man. So the link with anti-Semitism is obvious, because this conspiracism is targeting Jewish people in France, like Agnès Buzyn, her husband, Yves Lévy, and Jérôme Salomon, who is the general director of Health in France. Dieudonné Mbala, at the beginning of the month of March, incriminated the Rothschild. And what he said, for example, yes, he said that it was the Rothschild who were behind this epidemics. You have each times an element of a true element. For example, it is true that Yves Lévy, the husband of the ex health minister, took part in the official inauguration in 2017 of the P4 laboratory in Wuhan, in China, which is a result of a Franco-Chinese scientific cooperation. But it is false to claim that there is a link between the virus, which is known to be of natural origin, and this laboratory precisely. And that's it, I think. If you have questions, I would be very happy to try to answer it. Thank you.
Rudy, thank you very much for that overview, and we'll come back to you during the Q&A. And now I'm honored to introduce you to Sima Vaknin-Gil, who will speak about the strategic challenges of these issues.
Hi, thank you for the introduction, Charles. It's very hard to try and 8 minutes to walk you through the steps of a 4-minute strategy. But I will try to do that in a way that you might be able to understand how come I came up with the strategy of 3-layered, which is actually quite parallel to how we fight a virus, because anti-Semitism is a virus. So we're going to start with a status analysis. I'm going to put some work assumptions because we have to put some work assumptions. They don't have to be the true ones. They have to be the severe ones, because we have to prepare for the worst. And then they're going to be global ones. There's going to be an organized ideas and 4 logics, and eventually I'll go into the strategy. But I have to say, especially after I heard my two friends here, that we've entered the pandemic situation already in a spike in anti-Semitism. 2019 was a bad year for Jews. And the fact that we already experienced anti-Semitism coming from the right, coming from the left, and coming from radical Islam, this pandemic, we should look at it as a kind of a culmination in the everything that is happening, because this is a threat not just to Jews and maybe other minorities. Anti-Semitism, actually racism, bigotry, bias, paranoia, these are a threat not just for minorities, and in our case, the Jews, but also for democracy. And I think, and I hope you would agree with me, Joel and Rudy, is what we see today is not just that anti-Semitism is rising, but also democracies and even democratic values are under attack. We have law enforcement under attack. We have, in some cases, values under attack. And of course, in one case, we have in a country, a political entity under attack. So this is something that we should consider and think about it ahead. So when it comes to forming a strategy, we have always to start with status analysis. It's looking at the dangers and the risks, but also at the opportunities that reality has given us. So I will just name a few because it's very hard again to do that in 8 minutes, but just to give you the idea of what is the process into coming into a strategy. So the main characteristic that I find very interesting in this COVID-19 pandemic crisis is the fact that not only that has given rise to anti-Semitism, but also the fact that we have seen some theories and some themes coming from the Middle Ages back to life here in 2020, which is amazing. We are always talking about the full cycle of hate. They hate us for us being Jews, they hate our religion, they hate the entity which is Israel, and they hate the idea which is Zionism. And what we've seen here, that this full cycle of hate, all of it is under attack. We've got the individual, the Jew, the individual. We are portrayed as virus by itself. They are addressing our physical features, our supposedly greed, the selfish Jew. And this has been portrayed by my predecessors a lot, so I'm not going to go into it. But you have the individual under attack. And we also have the whole, the Jewish whole, the Jewry, the community under attack. Here we have the conspiracy theories. We want to gain control. We want to have financial gain. We want to reduce population, you name it. By the way, it's amazing that people are believing that, but this is the case. And again, we have Israel, the political entity, again under attack, using the COVID-19 as an excuse. And this, if the first two were coming mainly from the right, the last one is coming mainly from the left. The left and some political entities like the PA or Hamas. What is amazing to me is the fact that the coronavirus has awakened the far right and the far left. I'm sorry, but I'm not following the radical Islam, but I'm sure that there are some discourse over there. But you can see that the far right and the far left are actually doing an adaptation to the same messages using the correct themes which are connected to coronavirus. Right now, the discourse is still on the fringe, but we do see already penetration into the mainstream media, mainstream social media, in some cases, the fringe of the political arena. But again, political arena is by itself a mainstream issue. So the fact that we can see penetration, it's very small, it's mild, but it's happening. So it's very important for us to take note of that. One more thing, which is very amazing, is the fact that you can see countries like Turkey, like Iran, like the PA, Palestinian Authority, like Hamas, who are leading a vile anti-Semitic discourse. Usually they attack Israel. Now the mask has been taken off and you can see that they are actually anti-Semitic. One thing which is very important to realize for us, because we're very concentrated on ourselves, is the fact that we are not the only one who's under attack. You have Muslims in India under attack, you have Afro-Americans in the United States under attack, you have Chinese under attack all over. So the fact that not just Jews are under attack is something that we should consider. And one last thing which is very characteristic of the situation right now is that the most extreme discourse is on the dark web, on unmoderated channels, on encrypted channels like Telegram. And if one of you or some of you are following that, and I am following that, it is amazing to see how much really extreme discourse over there. And in some cases, call to action, still very mild, but there is call to action. But we also have opportunities, and this is something we also need to address. And I will just name very few. We have political and religious leadership, which are very, very responsible. They go against this phenomena and they back us up. We are not alone. I've talked about it before. The mask can be taken off in some cases. Once everything calmed down, then you will remember that those people, when they spoke through the coronavirus pandemic, there were vile anti-Semitism. The crisis. Usually what will happen is that people, if you remember the pyramid of needs of Maslow, usually people will be dealing with the basic issue of living, work, food, health. So they wouldn't have much time for great ideas or ideological fights. And this is something that we could use. And inside the Jewry, inside Jewish communities, we've seen the solidarity, which is very big. So this is the main things. And of course, there's others. Of the status analysis. Now, when it comes to work assumptions, to the post-COVID-19 era, I'm going to put some assumptions. They doesn't have to be necessarily true, but they do have to be more severe than the possible ones, mainly because I have a motto, prepare for the worst and hope for the best. So this is what I do. And history really taught us, and again, as Joel said before, when it comes to times of crisis, when Jews are gaining too much power into perceptions of some, and in sometimes political needs, history taught us that we pay the price. So in this case, we have to be prepared. And when I look at this COVID-19 pandemic crisis, I think it holds all the condition to create a potential of negative impact on Jewry around the world and on Israel and the connection between us. And I'm going to name just a few, just to show you the mindset of coming into a strategy. So some of the assumptions I'm putting on. First of all, I think there's going to be a long tail of going out of this coronavirus crisis. And I think that the feeling of continuous crisis will be going on for quite some time. There's going to be a very harsh economic challenges, and the inequality between people, between states, between communities, they're going to be very deepening, and it might have an effect. I think that the withdrawal from hyper-globalizations that we've already seen, we've seen that. The UK went out of the EU, countries are converging into themselves. So I think that the withdrawal inside from hyper-globalization is going to continue. And for us Jews, this hyperglobalization was in a way, a good thing. So withdrawing from that might bring some problems. I've read a lot about the concept that democracies who fail to address the issue of coronavirus very good might be paying a price, and that the political concept of democracy and democratic values would be the one to pay the price once we go out of this crisis to real life. I do know, because in Israel, that's what we do. When you fear for your life, you are willing to give away your civil rights. So just think what will happen globally. In this era of post-COVID-19, there's going to be a lot of use of fake news. People, countries like Russia or China or anyone who wants to gain control would use fake news to put his narrative down. And it's going to be, in some case, fight over narratives, and we might be caught in the middle. Two things that I'm not sure that are happening, but I'm just putting them forward. I think there are two stabilizing forces in the world for Jews now and for Israel that are losing their grips and losing their stature. One is the US, and the second one is the EU. The US, because it's been a while, which is, under Trump, it's been self-focused. China has taken over the role of the so-called superpower who helped European countries. United States doesn't do much. The EU, by the way, doesn't do much. On the opposite, when he was approached to have some help by countries like Italy and Spain and France, they were denied. So I think those two elements, USA and EU, might be a little bit more weakened after the corona ends. And of course, coming back to the public sphere is going to make everything a lot easier when it comes to physical harm. Now, when it comes to the strategy, after analyzing the situation and given some work assumptions, according to them we are going to form the strategy. And I always start with an organizing idea, and I would like to share with you the organizing idea that I think we should use. And I think that this is thinking and planning for the long run, but working and addressing the issues on the short run. And I'm going to put 4 logics, which together combine the strategy. Each logic goes and leads us to the next one. The first logic is know your surrounding. We have to understand better what is happening around the world. We have to do a better monitoring, understanding, awareness, analyzing the picture, and especially knowing what are the risks and what chances we can use. Knowing better things will help us lead. And this is the second logic. We have to lead, not handle. The third one is that if we want to lead, you have to be an initiator. And this is the third logic. We have to be more united inside of us, but we have also to be on the initiative. And from there, I'm going to the fourth logic, which is leveraging our assets. By the way, our assets could be our connections. The fact that we are spread all over the globe, in some cases, our positions, in some cases, our money, but leverage our assets as a whole and do a lot of coalition buildings because we are in a small number in the world, so we need bigger numbers, and this is done only by alliances and coalitions. The goal of the strategy is to contain and to keep to the fringe. I have no illusion that anyone can beat anti-Semitism. Now, looking at anti-Semitism, it has the same features, 5 features that pandemic has. It has a virus. In our case, it's a notion, it's an idea. We have the carriers. In a pandemic, it's animals and human beings. In anti-Semitism, it's just human beings. We have the contagion infrastructure. In our case, it's technology, it's globalizations. We have the catalyzer. In the coronavirus, it's some kind of a culinary event in China. But in anti-Semitism, it's the crisis himself. And immune and vaccine, in pandemic, you might have them. In anti-Semitism, I think that we might get close. Probably we won't be able to have them. But maybe education, maybe a little bit enforcement, but I don't think we have a vaccine to anti-Semitism. Now, when it comes to the strategy, and with that I will finish, I'm offering 3 layers strategy, 3 circles: inner circle, perimetric circle, and outer circle. The inner circle is actually strengthening and defense, and it's addressing Jewry and Israel, Jews as a whole. And I'm talking about 4 elements in this inner circle. I think that we need a new leadership. I think that the old leadership is not equipped to dealing with the new challenges. So I think that we have to have a new leadership, younger leadership, equivalent to the one that really holds the keys now. Think of it as a shadow government for the Jewish people. I don't want to use that because then all conspiracy theories will rise, but really young generation that will think ahead. I think there's needs for better cooperation and coordination between Israel and the communities, Jewry all over, and I think it started. I have an idea of an infrastructure that will enable all of us, all of the time, to have all of the information about anti-Semitism and what is happening all over the world. Think of it as a big pool that everybody throw all his information in, and everybody can get all the information out of it. This is the only way we would be able to have an information superiority as to what is happening around the globe, because otherwise each one of us would see just the specific angle which he searches. And of course, we have to have a physical defense strengthened, mainly because I don't want to have any kind of success feeling for the other side. So the defense, the physical defense, has to be a lot more stronger. As for the perimetric circle, in this case, if before it was strengthening us, the perimetric circle is talking about immune and force building. And I will give you three examples. More, as much as we can, coalition and alliances. We have to work with authorities because only authorities can do legislation and can do enforcement, and they have the real force. We don't have the real force. And in this perimetric circle, we should use all the leverage in order to immune and isolate hub of hate, of hatred. We can work with media giants, we can work with religious leadership, we can work with huge companies, we can find whatever leverage we think that will enable us to isolate and immune ourselves from anti-Semitism. And on the outer circle, which is the last one, in this case, you can do both. You can do either offense or you can do kind of education or something like that. So in this circle, I usually would like to have a price tag. Every anti-Semitic post or discourse or action will be accompanied by a price tag, dismantling the generators, demanding accountability from those who have the power, and the positive action is actually education and engagement and experience and trying to show different things coming from a positive point of view. Those three layers, I think, which are in match to how you deal with the pandemic, you immune, you isolate, and you vaccine, you offense. I think this is the way that the Jewish people overall should organize themselves ahead, and hopefully we won't have to use it.
So, Sima, thank you very much. Thank you all very much for your impressive presentations. And I just want to ask, I guess, a simple question, and I'll start with Sima. So given the inequalities that you described and the exacerbation of inequalities given the pandemic and the kind of the global almost stop to our economy, what do you think are the short-term threats to Jewish communities in the diaspora? Are there short-term security needs that need to be addressed? Because now we're sort of all in lockdown and we're all online, and online anti-Semitism is spiking. What happens when people start coming out of their homes? Is there a need for the community to defend themselves in a different way than we are used to?
Yes, I think that the first thing, if I was a Jew living abroad, this is what I would do. People were in quarantine. They were exposed to amazing theories and conspiracy theories and accusations. They are getting paranoid, they are biased, they are angry, they are in a very bad situation. And when they are going out, they will be able to take everything that they've learned inside into the outer world. And I'm sure that we will find more actions against Jews. By the way, we see them now. If you just look what happened in the United States, just in the last week, you have 2 synagogues in Alabama being charged. You have in LA a synagogue, which is, so everything is happening right now on a small scale. Once the quarantine is off, I think we might see more. But even if we don't, I think that the state of mind should be, this is the way to prepare. So physical security, for sure. I would put a lot of emphasis on monitoring hubs of hatred. I think this is very important. I do believe in information superiority, otherwise you won't be able to do much. And I think the first thing that I would do is demand accountability from the social network, from social media. Although most of the hatred things went to Telegram and other platforms, but I would demand accountability from those, yes. They enable the anti-Semitism to grow. They should do something to stop it.
Thanks, Sima. And Rudy, you also mentioned in your presentation that an anti-Semitic video was shared and had more than 3 million views, which is staggering. From your perspective, do you share Sima's view that once the lockdown is ended, that things will change on the ground?
It's difficult to say. I really don't know. I think that things won't change so much that we think today. On the front of the struggle against anti-Semitism, it is true that the situation currently is almost dramatic, because in the entire history of France, you never had on a so thin period of time, 10 or 12 years, a number of Jews assassinated as Jews. You know, we had more than 10 people who have been assassinated because they were Jews. And in a period of peace and on the French metropolitan territory, there is no precedent, no historical precedent of this situation. Even at the time of the Dreyfus affair, for example, more than one century ago, and all that. The Jewish people in France is only 1% of the general population. So I think we have a lot of work for the future, and we need. It is right to analyze and to. We can stop to argument against these commentaries, these anti-Semitic tropes, against this conspiracy, anti-Semitic theories.
Thank you, Rudy. So it's also, you mentioned the Dreyfus affair. Yeah. It's also interesting. There's a very good film about Dreyfus by Roman Polanski.
Yeah.
The discourse, particularly in France, around Polanski is also very interesting, in quotations. Joel, you showed one image of the former Minister of Health next to poisoning a well. So I was wondering, where did that image come from? Which kind of journal was it? Right wing, left wing?
Well, this is, I would say, definitely right wing, but Rudy will confirm it, because I think it's Rudy which is the specialist. But what's interesting to see is, if you have cartoons initiating from the right wing, it will be spread also by left wing people. And we've seen it like some years ago, cartoons made by someone connected to Dieudonné, and it was a socialist senator who posted on his website, etc. So this is the problem now. And as Sima said, you know, anti-Semitism is global and ideological. It's from the extreme right and the extreme left, unfortunately.
Right. And also, Joel, your work is amazing, because I think you're deeply rooted in history, but you also have a very strong understanding of the contemporary landscape in Europe and Belgium and France and beyond. What's your sense regarding the security of the Jewish community? Are you concerned? Are you more like Rudy, that things will sort of just be more of the same? Or are you more on the side of Sima, that seems that we need to really start to plan and react to a changing global reality or European reality? What's your sense of the threat?
It depends where you are. And I think I would agree with both. I think concerning United States, I think it's going to be, because United States, there was a very long parenthesis, and they were protected. And there were almost no anti-Semitism in the United States, at least. And now we have seen it's not because, and we've seen the last 2 years, an acceleration of violent attacks against the Jews. And as we say, the liberation of the anti-Semitic discourse. And this is new, and this will continue. And we can see it through website, etc. And it's incredible to see it. In Europe, I agree with Rudy. We don't know yet, but it's going to be a slow progress. And as long as I believe mainstream people are less and less anti-Semitic, anti-Semitism will rise on the fringe.
It means ultra-left, extreme right, and radical Islam. And unfortunately, history is made by the fringes, it's made by the extremists. Because it's easy to live as a Jew in Europe, but unfortunately, it could be quite dangerous because of few percent of people who are certain about the fact that we are conspiring against them. And to conclude, the only problem also is a problem of generation. It means the old generation who knew about the Holocaust, etc., who had a little bit of guilt towards the Jews are disappearing, and the new generation, they don't have such, I would say, knowledge of history, and they are totally ignorant. And ignorance is terrible. When I see my students, it means they know nothing about the Jews, they know nothing about Israel, and there is a terrible gap, and I don't see how we will be able to address those people. It means the Greens especially. And you can see, I just finished a book on BDS, and you can see that BDS is widely, supported by people who are genuine, progressive people, but they don't know anything about Israel and about Zionism and the Jewish people. And this is tragic.
Charles, if I would like,
Sure.
Charles, I would like to say something just to remark to what you said. I didn't give you an estimation as to what is going to happen. I gave you an assessment from a strategic point of view to what we should aim at. So the fact is that when people are going back to the street, something might happen, makes us, the feeling, we don't want to give them the feeling of success of even one attempt against Jews that will happen and succeed. So the fact that we have to be more secure is something that doesn't have to do with reality, just something we need to do. So it wasn't an estimation, it wasn't an intelligent estimation as to what is happening. It's just, an assessment as to what might be happening.
Right. So fair enough. And also just regarding Joel's comment on anti-Semitism in the United States, a colleague of mine, Larry Amsel, who's a professor of psychiatry at Columbia University, we've had many discussions and we've been studying this for a while. It's interesting that Jewish institutions in New York City, of all places, for many years, has never advertised their presence. So there's, when you make it in New York City, when you open a business or an institution in New York, you put a big sign because if you make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. And Jewish organizations in the United States and in New York have never put up signs that they're there. It's very discreet, and security for many years has steadily increased. So it's an interesting phenomenon. So there's something going on in the United States that I think scholars really need to address. It just didn't happen in the last year or two. There's been something going on for a while, and it's not just the threat of terrorism. There's also, I think, other threats and movements sort of swirling around the United States. Joel, you have a comment?
Yes, just to say that the problem with anti-Semitism, whatever we do, it's always returning against us. For instance, if there will be a vaccine, if the Israeli will find first the vaccine to the coronavirus, it will return against the Jews. It will demonstrate that originally it was created by Jew, and this is terrible. And this we can see, the fact that, for instance, Tel Aviv is a gay-friendly city, again, it's against them. The fact that that the Israeli army doesn't rape Palestinians also was used by someone to prove that the Israeli Tzahal is racist, that even there they didn't want even to rape Palestinian women, etc. And this is the problem of anti-Semitism. The Jews are rich and poor, the Jews are there, they create virus and then antidote, and it's quite frightening. And it means that it's going to be quite difficult to fight against it.
Right. There's a question by Ian in Miami Beach, and he asks, there's some stories circulating in the media that some Israeli pharmaceutical companies or doctors may be on the cusp of having a vaccine or discovering a cure for the pandemic. Do you think that this will help Israeli reputation, or will this reinforce conspiracy theories in an alarming way?
Ask Sima or Rudy.
Whoever would like to answer, you're welcome.
I think Joel just answered that. No matter what happened, I think there will always be those who will try to suggest otherwise. So if an Israeli company would come up with a vaccine, there will be those who will say that we've created the coronavirus in order to come up with a vaccine and then sell it and have a lot of money. So there's always going to be something that for someone to use. hopefully it will stay on the fringe.
Agreed. We have another question from Dexter Van Zyl, and he asked Joel, Joel, how do you interpret or respond to Giovanni Gasparo's recent blood libel painting? He portrays the Jewish people as responsible for the death of Simon of Trent with a hooked nose.
I know.
Yeah. So what do you think of that? And then he also adds, in other paintings, he portrays Jesus as a beautiful, handsome Jewish person with no hooked nose. So why?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So
but my conference, what I try to to demonstrate is the fact that the problem with Christianity is the problem with, of course, Judaism, because it's the same religion, but in a sense they have to differentiate. You have to kill the father, Judaism, etc. And you can see on the painting, you will see Jesus more and more looking like, I don't know, your Westerners and Aryan whatsoever, and the Jews more and more like what is supposed to be a Semite, etc. And in fact, they're both Jews, which is absurd. And concerning this painting, honestly, I was shocked. And as a researcher, of course, I was amazed, and it was interesting because it confirmed the fact that history is very important. What we call the collective inconscience is still there, and it explained why those myths dating back from the Middle Age are coming back. And as you know, that's why also the only, I would say, wars, the only conflicts when you will always, speak about the number of children killed, etc., will only the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it means. And this is again ritual murder. So I think we have to understand, and this is what I try to do, contemporary anti-Semitism through history, and what Rudy said about the anti-Semitic trope dating back from the 13th century. And this is really essential, I would say, to more or less to try to understand to the good people that, especially maybe they're not anti-Semite, but the image they're using are anti-Semite, or at least as anti-Semitic origin. And this painting is terrible, and it should be banned by the Vatican, because we have to know that Saint John of Trent was canonized, but it was de-canonized already by Paul II, the Pope Paul VI, which means that we are going back to very old anti-Semitic tradition.
Okay, thank you. We have a question or a comment from Moshe Ronen from Toronto.
Moshe, I remember you.
Your old student colleagues.
Definitely.
So he says that he's creating a different message that he thinks we should communicate to political leadership in Canada and maybe in other countries in terms of our approach to the anticipated impact of the virus on anti-Semitism, which is that is there a new or different message that we should communicate to political leadership in our countries in terms of the approach that the impact of the virus will have on society? And prior to the epidemic, there was already an increase of anti-Semitism. So the question is, should there be a new message, a more urgent message? And what is that message to our political leadership in light of this potential threat?
Can I answer?
Sure.
Yeah. No, I just would like to add that people should realize that these two topics, anti-Semitism and conspiracism, are today completely linked. And I totally agree with Sima about the fact that our democratic values are under attack now. And the last point, I think, concerning this epidemics, we didn't enough repeat that this new virus could not be an artificial virus. We know it, the scientists know it. For example, Richard Albright in the United States said that there is absolutely nothing in the genome sequence of this virus that indicates that it was engineered. So this is crucial and very important to say, to remember, because it is this conspiracy belief that is at the root of almost all conspiracy theories about the COVID-19. So we must repeat and repeat it.
Charles, I think I would like to address the issue of Jesus just for a moment, just remember it. You do remember that there is a narrative that the Palestinians are trying to push, that Jesus was not a Jewish, he was a Palestinian, a man of color. So this is amazing to see how even history is being changed in favor of political needs. But as for Moshe's questions, I think we should be pushing the term domestic terror when it comes to anti-Semitism. I think this is the right term. Anti-Semitism or Jew hatred or whatever is something very local, is something which doesn't have the right context in mind. But when you use the word terror, everybody agrees that you have to fight terror and use any means that you can in order to fight that. Now, when it comes to anti-Semitism, this is a domestic terror against part of the population. So I think this is something we should push, this term. And I think Pickles in the UK might have done that using PSC information, using the correct term of domestic terror. I think we should adopt that.
Yeah, and David Hirsch and others have been saying the same thing here in the UK.
Okay.
We have a question from a member of parliament in West Africa, Rawlings Camara, and he argues that in parts of Africa, West Africa, that people believe that Jesus had a Semitic look to him, and that replacement theology is being used to portray him as a white person. And what effect does this sort of replacement theology have on anti-Semitism today in light of the pandemic virus and perhaps the rise of nationalism and right-wing white supremacy? Is there a religious basis for this or not necessarily?
It's a question to me.
To anybody who would like to answer.
Well, it's a difficult question because I don't know this, but the fact is that, well, I suppose Jesus looked like a Jew, so I don't know if each Jew were white or not white. It means it's absurd, you know, racism doesn't exist. But Sima is correct. There is no how to say, a kind of, but it's quite old. The fact that Jesus now is more and more, so, you know, in some area is, how to say, portrayed as a Palestinian. And there are even, you know, it's not on this myth, this fake news is not only made by, I would say, pro-Palestinian Arabic people, but also by genuine Christian, etc. And you will find on the internet a lot of websites who will present Jesus as a Palestinian, persecuted by the new Romans, actually, which are the Jews or the Zionists or whatsoever, wearing a keffiyeh. Then one of the, I would say, and one of the main artists, the main anti-Semitic cartoonist is the Brazilian Latouf, which is playing on this absurd myth. And again, it means that everything plays against the Jews. If they can even use Jesus against the Jews, because it's absurd, because Jesus demonstrated that there were Jewish people in Judea a long time before there were any Arabs and any Muslim. But this is how it works.
So we only have a few more minutes, so I'm going to ask the panel 2 quick questions and anybody could answer as they wish. We have a question from Sarah Gon from South Africa. And she said that most Western governments never call out or criticize the Iranian regime, the Turkish government, or the Palestinian leadership for public anti-Semitic comments. So on a world stage, particularly at the UN, there's no backlash. So anti-Semitism won't face any punishment or any sanction. Could you please comment on that? And especially as these regimes are playing more of an impactful role on spreading anti-Semitism. The Iranian regime and the Turkish regime, as Sima said at the beginning, is playing a very impactful role on spreading anti-Semitic tropes around the world. So could you comment on that? And then I'll ask one more question afterwards.
But of course, the problem is the majority, you know, la majorité, it means. You can see it in the Council of Human Rights in Geneva. And you can see that the worst nation who violates the human rights are, you know, directing this, you know, this committee. It means that's the problem. They have the majority. And what can you do? And of course, there are some NGOs who try to counteract this, but it's quite difficult. It's very difficult to fight against anti-Semitism. We, the Jewish people, we are, very few. And that's why, as Sima said, we have to build coalition. This is the more important thing. Coalition with everyone who is able to understand and to act reasonably, with reason.
So, Joel, do you think the European Union many countries have adopted the IRA definition on anti-Semitism, and yet they're still maintaining good relations with Iran? So as the regime steps up its anti-Semitic incitement, should we as communities and people who care about human rights put more pressure on the EU to sanction the Iran, not just for its violations of nuclear issues, but of promoting anti-Semitism in Europe and threatening citizens of European countries?
Of course, definitely we should. But the problem is that it's quite difficult. But actually, you can see that, in fact, contrary to what many people believe, EU is still, I think, more or less behind Israel, contrary to what you believe. And it means as long as we have people like Merkel, Macron, and Boris Johnson, I think we don't have to worry concerning the EU. But the rest, you can see what's happening with Turkey. Turkey blackmailed Europe. It's quite easy for them because, they hold in hostage more than 3 million people. So we cannot act, we have to take care of the fact that they are strong and they control. It means a huge border. They can cause chaos if they want. We have to be realistic too.
I agree with Joel. I think we shouldn't be naive and we shouldn't pursue goals that are not achievable. This is something that we must not do. And when it comes to global foreign relation, interests are a lot more tougher to convert than everything else. So when it comes to political interest or economic interest, or I don't know, anything else, it doesn't stand alongside with the fight in anti-Semitism. So we should pursue what we can have and not unrealistic goals.
Rudy, any comment?
Yeah, one comment, just I think one of the explanations of the virulence of anti-Semitism is that in the real world, at the contrary of the phantasmatic view of the anti-Semites, Jews are not so strong in the reality. They are not so strong than the anti-Semites believe. And Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, he wrote that weakness breeds hatred. Weakness excites hatred. And I think it's one of the roots of the anti-Semitism. If Israel and if Jews were 1 or 2 billion on Earth, I think anti-Semitism would be very, very, very different.
Rudy, that's why there is the scapegoat, and the goat is weak.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So thank you. So would anybody like to make a final comment as we wrap things up?
Okay for me.
Sima?
Me too.
Joel? Okay. So
Thanks.
So Sima, Rudy, and Joel, thank you very much for participating in this important panel. And
Thank you.
Your comments and insights are really important to us, and thank you for sharing them, and continued success on your important work. And
thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you. All the best.
Goodbye.
And, just one more comment. If you go to our website at isgap.org, www.isgap.org, we're posting more seminars. We're going to have another seminar next week. On April the 20th, we're having Fiamma Nierenstein, who works at the JCPA, the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, and she was a former member of the Italian Parliament. She'll be speaking about anti-Semitism in Europe. And then every week we're going to have a seminar. We have David Patterson, who's a professor from the University of Texas. He'll be speaking. Lorenzo Vadino, who'll be speaking on funding of political Islam, the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States. We have Amy Ellman, who's looking at the rise of anti-Semitism and issues of gender. So we have many seminars coming up, and Ira Guberman, who put this seminar together, who's sitting in New Jersey and New York, We'll post all of these new seminars on our website. So I hope you will attend on a regular basis. So everybody, thank you for attending, and stay safe and stay healthy.